Well, hey guys.
Hello.
Good evening.
Welcome all of you for joining us. Thanks for coming out after this last presidential debate. Only 2.5 years left to go until our next primary debate for 2024. So let's kick off that 2.5 year gap right, guys. Jonah, what you got there?
What I got here?
Yeah.
I got Jameson's Irish whiskey.
Sounds good. And
I waited for the final statements for me to pour it, which was
that's what I was going to ask. Is that a celebratory whiskey or a sad, drowning sorrows whiskey now?
It's a drink to forget whiskey. So.
What were the most forgettable moments for you?
I said this on Twitter. I will never stop finding in a dark comic way the way Trump says that no president has done more for Black people, and then he does this as this gracious concession, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. And I just love it so much because it's this great pose where he is like, whoa, my original statement, that was really excessive. So I'm going to be the reasonable one here and concede that some people could reasonably disagree and say maybe Abraham Lincoln. I love that, and it haunts me. But I don't know. I mean, other than that, I take full responsibility. It's China's fault. I thought that was a memorable moment.
David, this was clearly a significantly better performance from Trump than the first debate. Where did you think Biden landed compared to the first debate?
You know, I thought that Biden, two things. We'll do the good and we'll do the bad for Biden. I think the good is this just ended the Biden is senile stuff. This just ended that he can't engage in a conversation stuff. This ended the argument that, well, all that Trump has to do is let Biden speak and Biden's going to go, wander off into nonsense land. He was fine. He was fine. And which reminded me of the Democratic debates, which time and time again, you would end the Democratic debates and you would say, he is fine. So I guess that's the good. It's also the bad. He's just fine. He says things, it's obvious he will say things that his team sitting in their room are going, what on earth? And you could see him catch himself. I want to end the oil industry. I mean, transition. And so you have these moments where he says things or I never said I want to ban fracking. And you could even tell the wheels were turning with him. He goes, oh, maybe I did. And I said, what I meant was I was going to do it on federal land. And so you see how a very sharp debater, somebody who is on top of policy, who is hyper prepared for debate, could really do very well against him. But he wasn't facing that. So the good news for him, he's fine. He dealt with once and for all, as if he hadn't done it before in the one-on-one with Bernie Sanders, that he's got, that he's all there. He's all there. At the same time, it's not exactly a performance that gives you the idea that this is going to be a president sort of commanding the American stage. And that's not necessarily what people want right now. But I felt like he would have been far more vulnerable to a better debater.
Steve, there are some presidential debates in history that have made some small difference in potentially the outcome of the race. Was this debate one of them? Was the last debate one of them?
The last debate might have been, honestly. I mean, when you look at what happened and you follow the public polling, you talk to people polling races in swing states, and they will tell you that there was this dramatic plunge after the last debate for Donald Trump. He lost whatever momentum he had started to build, and it really seems to have mattered. He's been pretty flat ever since then. I don't think this one will matter. The most effective
Will it
lines.
stop the bleeding?
No, I don't think so. The most effective lines that Donald Trump marshaled all night, I thought, were the repeated times that he said to Joe Biden, basically, you've been in Washington forever. You haven't gotten these things done. And that's a reasonable point to make. Unfortunately for Trump, he made that argument immediately after a long discussion about healthcare, where he himself had said, I'm going to have a beautiful Obamacare replacement. And, the obvious question is, why don't you have one now? I mean, that's a pretty fair statement.
I
And then
thought
the other,
Barack Obama, by the way, had such a good line on that, and I was surprised that Biden didn't borrow it tonight. The Republicans have had a healthcare plan coming in 2 weeks for 10 years.
yeah, that was a good line from Obama. Joe Biden dissed Barack Obama a couple of times, which I thought was sort of interesting. I mean, if you're a progressive and you're watching this debate tonight, he was harsh on Bernie Sanders again. Effectively called him a loser. And then when he was pressed on why he hadn't made these immigration policy changes while he was vice president, he said, look, man, I wasn't the president. I was the vice president.
I noticed
I'll
that.
do it now. We made mistakes. I'll do it now. And I thought, okay, if you're a hardcore Obama supporter, you might not like that. Last point, I think the other thing that comes out of tonight that's notable is what didn't happen. And it was all of this buildup for the past 9 days, 9 days about this scandal, about this supposed scandal. And, really Trump world has built their closing argument around these detailed allegations about Hunter Biden. It's just sort of, you knew it was coming. You assumed that Donald Trump would be prepared for it. And it was just flat. He did nothing with it. It didn't work. And, he's living in this world where that stuff is on his mind all the time. So he just jumps right in, and he's in the middle of, these claims or these conspiracies without ever bothering to bring people along. So he says, oh yeah, you're the big guy. Well, you might not be the big guy, but I think you're the big guy. Well, you're the big. If you haven't been following this, you have no idea what he's talking about. And then the kicker for Trump is at the very end of the discussion about that stuff, again, building to be what effectively his closing argument, Trump said, if this stuff is true, then he's a corrupt politician. Wait. If this stuff is true, you're building your whole argument on the idea that it is true and that he is corrupt. That's what your sons have been saying, your surrogates have been saying for the better part of a week. If it's true, undermines the sort of central thesis of his argument.
I thought it was the best example where debate prep would have helped. Like, if that's going to be your closing argument, you needed debate prep to practice a couple different segues to go into that. When you're doing debate prep with a candidate, and that there's 5 arguments you definitely want to get out there, you may not get asked the right question to say those. And so what you're going to do is you're going to practice different segues. All right, they ask about healthcare. How can you get there from healthcare? How can you get there from, random topics? They didn't seem to have practiced that very well. And second, then, to exactly your point, you got to set the table. That's at least what we call it. I don't know if that's what y'all call it in your households, but if you're going to jump into a topic that's fairly complicated, you have to set the table of who are you talking about? What are you talking about? Where, how, when? I mean, basic stuff. And instead, he jumped in like halfway down the storyline, then tried to back up a little, but then fast forwarded. And, I have been following this reasonably closely, and I got pretty confused, and it took away any of the punch. And to me, set aside what the actual allegations are, whether they're true, whether they're false, whether they should be covered in the mainstream media or not, it was such a great example of a failure to prepare your candidate for the event.
And then Joe Biden had the ultimate riposte when he said, and you have a secret bank account in China. It was based on a New York Times story. And that's something that sort of, whether you've been following this or not, if people are going to remember anything out of that exchange, I think that's probably the thing that they'll remember. So all of this buildup.
I didn't follow that either. I was like, what is Joe Biden? Like, he didn't set the table either. But that was sort of maybe the theme of this debate.
Yes, I have a slightly different take on all this, since I blew my opportunity to actually weigh in on the debate at the beginning of this. So I think it was by far Donald Trump's best debate performance. Not just this cycle, but including last time as well, including probably all of the primary performances. I think he did really, really well. I think one of the amazing things is how, particularly in the wake of the first debate, that the curve was so wildly blown up that doing this is a bravura performance that basically every conservative, in MAGA world is celebrating, what a great guy. People saying, where was this Trump? Blah, blah, blah. People are joking, half joking. This was the night he finally became president. And I think he did. I think he did well. But when you say, this shows you the limits or the failure to prepare properly, this is the most prepared we've ever seen Trump. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that somehow you could have gotten him a major, whole standard deviation better than this, I'm very skeptical about. I mean, I take your point. I mean, I think you're right about the table setting and all that. He often talks as if everybody who's watching, an audience of 60, 70 million people, that they all watch Judge Jeanine every Saturday night. And they know his code, his shorthand, and all of this kind of thing.
Judge Jeanine is a host on Fox News.
That's right.
Just to set the table.
But he also has this long history of playing this game, right? Where Steve says, he doesn't walk people through it and all this kind of stuff. And then when he casts doubt on whether the thing was actually true, that's been his MO forever. Remember, I mean, the whole Ted Cruz's dad killed Kennedy thing. He was just saying, look, there's a respected publication that's raising this. I'm just pointing it out. He never wants to take ownership of these kinds of things. When he said, I don't know anything about, when he says, I don't know anything about Giuliani or Bannon or anything, he always wants other people to do the heavy lifting of the mud throwing for him. And I understand that. It's just not very effective strategy in a debate. As for Biden, I agree entirely with David that his senile thing is gone. His old thing is really firmly established at this point, particularly by the end of it. It felt like, it was time to get everyone back to the home after the early bird special at the Denny's in Boca Raton or something. He was losing a lot of his oomph and his energy. And I think in the beginning, the first part, and maybe even the second part on COVID, the fact that he lost essentially to Trump on points on COVID is a political scandal. The Hunter Biden stuff, that he was incapable of mustering the kind of indignation that he gets a pass for mustering, I think was a real missed opportunity. But at the same time, I don't think it changed very much at all, in part because 50 million people have already voted. And
45, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, the people who are waiting for permission to say, okay, now I have permission to vote against Biden, maybe some fraction of a point among them moved on all of this in Trump's favor.
To Trump after this debate?
I think so. Yeah, I think
wow.
This was the only gettable voters left for Trump are the people who really want to vote for him and can't bring themselves to do it. And by being sober-ish, responsible-ish, less rude, all of that kind of stuff, there are a handful of those people he can maybe pull over. I just don't think there are enough of them to matter.
So, David,
yeah.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a conservative watching tonight's debate, what gave you the most hope for a Biden presidency, perhaps? What gave you the most fear in a Biden presidency that you heard tonight?
I would say the thing that gave me the most hope is the obvious way in which this claim that Joe Biden is a tool of others gets under his skin. That this is not a guy who ran for president 3 times now, and a guy who's laid himself out there and has won the primary, this big sweeping primary. And it's pretty obvious in his own mind. He says, no, I'm not wanting to be anybody's, I'm not Bernie Sanders' empty suit. And I think a lot of real concern in conservative America is that he is just the vehicle for Bernie Sanders. He is just the vehicle, to use Trump's very online term that probably nobody outside of quarters of Twitter and primetime Fox, of AOC +3. It's pretty clear that gets under his skin, and it's pretty clear that he's not running as a revolutionary figure, which is, I think, one of the biggest concerns that you hear all the time on the right, on the grassroots. So that would be the thing that I would think would be the most reassuring, is that it's pretty obvious he sees himself as his own man. He sees himself as sort of doing incremental stuff, not revolutionary stuff. And I think that that would be encouraging to people who have been hearing in one ear, this is the onset of the great progressive revolution. You know, on the other hand, he does not have is there anything in his platform that would be remotely called conservative, with the exception of, and I do appreciate his appreciation for our international alliances, which I think are very appreciated. But if you were going to say to me a year ago, what is Joe Biden's one of his great weaknesses, I would say foreign policy from a conservative standpoint. I don't really trust him on foreign policy other than to continue to support NATO. But look, conservatives are not voting for Joe Biden for policy. Full stop. Full stop. There's just not a conservative policy-based argument for Joe Biden that I've heard that's truly coherent or effective. They're voting for Joe Biden as a transitional figure away from Donald Trump, to the extent conservatives are voting for him.
Steve, what's the topic that we didn't touch on tonight, or that you didn't think you got enough on tonight?
There were, I thought Kristen Welker did a very good job moderating the debate. She pushed them to be specific on China, on what exactly getting tough with China would mean, because we've heard from both candidates repeatedly that they're going to get tough with China. And I don't think we got those specifics. We got more sort of platitudes, and it didn't really advance the argument much. One interesting sort of corollary point there was when Joe Biden said that he would not meet with Kim Jong-un without preconditions. If you remember back to the 2008 Democratic primaries and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and the fights that they had about the preconditions, and he's moved away from the Obama position there, and in effect has said, taken a much tougher position than Donald Trump, who's met with Kim Jong-un multiple times and exchanged love letters and what have you. So if I were pointing to something that gave me some comfort about what Biden would do on a policy level, that's better, I think, than what we've gotten. But I agree.
I agree with that.
So
if
Jonah,
you're voting for Donald Trump or for Joe Biden and you're a conservative, it's not because you think there's going to be policy outcomes that you like.
I went into this debate saying that the thing that Donald Trump could do to win the debate was to focus on court packing and simply cede all of his time to Joe Biden to flim-flam around on the court packing question. And I think it was Steve, but maybe it was you, who said that it would be malpractice if Joe Biden did not have a better answer going into tonight's debate on court packing. Lo and behold, Joe Biden had an answer that he released earlier today saying that he would start a commission to look at how best to depoliticize the court. This could include term limits. This could include court packing, et cetera, et cetera. And then tonight, we didn't really get anything on it. Missed opportunity for Biden or missed opportunity for Trump?
Or missed opportunity for Welker, right? I mean, she did ask more loaded, hostile questions framed in liberal ways of Trump than she did of anything of the sort with Biden. And that would have been an easy one to score points as for balance, asking Biden about. It's an interesting question. I've been following the response on the right from the brethren on this court packing thing. And it really is a bit of a Rorschach test. Lots of people on the right want this to be proof that he's going all in for court packing. And there are lots of people on the left, I should say, who think that this is his way of dodging the question. I personally think this was the great sort of, as Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. And that basically he's doing what all politicians do, is I will appoint a blue ribbon commission that will study this. It will be like entitlement reform and all of these things, and then we'll come up with recommendations, and by then I'll be running for re-election, or I'll be dead, or bees will have inherited the planet as the most intelligent life form, or whatever it is. And
we all know it'll be octopodes, Jonah.
It's octopodes. Okay, we'll put a pin in that. So I think in a way it's a kind of a missed opportunity for Biden, only insofar as his answer is so soporific and boring on it that it, as David was saying, it saps away from this idea that he's this radical. And it gives Trump the ability. It would be a rough time for Trump to try to explain why this blue ribbon commission of bipartisan legal scholars is really the Trojan horse that is going to lead to court packing. So I think it would have been better for Biden to give the boring answer at the debate as well, because not everybody followed 60 Minutes or saw his answer earlier today.
David, thoughts on court packing?
Yeah, I was surprised that it didn't come up more. I mean, because that is one area where I think Biden is has been vulnerable because he hasn't had a good answer, and it's the one of the areas where he isn't actually willing to just really kind of dunk on his own left flank, and he has dunked on the left a few times in these debates, and bragging about how badly he beat Bernie, but he doesn't do it there, which is very interesting to me that he doesn't do that. But I think, I think the reality, and Sarah, we've talked about this on Advisory Opinions podcast, plug. Is, I think what will end up happening with court packing is that there aren't going to be leading Democrats who would want to start a Biden administration with the least popular plank in their platform. That they would want to start with that 65% stuff, the healthcare package, coronavirus relief. They would want to start with the big wins that are sort of traditional Democratic legislative wins. But then that court packing thing is not dealt with. It's not ended. It would be sort of hanging like the sword of Damocles over the head of the court. And you have an abortion case that comes up, and you would start to hear Democratic senators saying some version of nice little 9-person court you got there, guys. Shame if anything happens to it. And that's the way this whole thing would work out, not from, late January, early February 2017 or 2021 that they introduce a court packing bill, or maybe somebody does, but it goes nowhere because they're going to deal with the big it was very clear to me, Joe Biden wants to be a big, classic, mainstream Democratic politician to do big, classic, mainstream Democratic stuff. And court packing isn't high on that early agenda, I don't think.
All right, Steve, let's look forward past this debate. We've got less than 2 weeks left. I tried to go vote today and failed because the line was so incredibly long that I, pulling away from the polling place, was filling out the application for my absentee ballot just in case that I can't get there in a time when the line's shorter. This is not unusual throughout the country. I live in Virginia, which is not even really a swing state this time. And we're seeing these numbers, as Jonah mentioned, 45 million people have already voted. Let me give you some more stats. Echelon Insights, our friend of the pod, as we say, Krista Soltis Anderson's company, they're estimating 157 million Americans will vote in 2020. To give our viewers some idea of that number, in 2016, 138 million people voted. So that would be a 20 million person increase. And in 2016, 157 million people were registered to vote. So it would be like if in 2016, every single person who had been able to vote could vote. The reason that number is going to jump so much this time is because registration numbers have been through the roof. First-time voter numbers have been through the roof. We now have 2.5 times more first-time voters having voted already than we saw in 2016. And last fun stat, in 2016, when you asked people how, were they more enthusiastic than usual to vote in this election, about half of voters said that they were in 2016. And remember, this was Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. It was a weird effing race. This time around, it's 75% of Republicans say they are more enthusiastic than usual. So just under a 25% jump from 2016. Democrats, 80% more enthusiastic than usual, almost closing in on 30-point jump from 2016. So, Steve, the last debate's done. There are no more major planned moments of this election, and maybe a third of the voters have already voted. What does the enthusiasm tell you about how this race is shaping up, and what's left in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it tells us mostly about our state of polarization, right? I mean, people who love Donald Trump, and I don't think there's a huge swelling of enthusiasm that has people really fired up about Joe Biden. I don't think we're likely to see lots of Joe Biden boat parades between now and election day. I think it's negative views of Donald Trump, and people want to go to the polls and vote to get him out of office. The thing that I'm most concerned about is foreign interference. I think it's a serious issue. We had the press conference last night. That sounds like, with the benefit of 24 hours of hindsight, it sounds like what the Iranians were doing with sort of stepping up, spoofing emails, pretending that they were sending emails to voters, threatening to be these proud boys, these
Or poor boys.
right wing, or poor boys,
Poor boy.
right wing
Ships.
provocateurs.
Good sandwich.
It sounds sort of like child's play. I think the more significant, there's a good Washington Post piece out today about what the Russians are up to. There's a very good New York Times piece, very scary New York Times piece out tonight, talking about the fact that Russians have been in and out of our electoral systems, sort of poking and prying and probing inside of our computer networks. That's the kind of stuff then you really get nervous. And I think the intelligence assessments are that the Russians have been content thus far to kind of mess with our, sort of take a public facing approach, try to increase the polarization, try to make people angry at one another, try to sort of create that civil unrest or exacerbate the civil unrest that's there. It's really concerning. I think this New York Times piece, it's really concerning if we find out that they were in our systems and that there may be an opportunity for them to do more. The Times piece makes it sound like we have a pretty good handle on what they want to do. We have some sense of what their intentions are. That's just never very comforting, because there are holes in what we're seeing that don't fill out that picture, and you just worry that if you see pretty radical anomalies on election night, you're worried about it.
Hey, Sarah,
the same
can I float a
question
theory to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so
He doesn't usually ask permission. Let's be honest.
I know, it's weird.
well, it just occurred to me, so I want to tread lightly, counselors. Stipulated, there's a lot of passion about Donald Trump out there. Stipulated that people, negative polarization, everything that David and I have been writing about for years, all true, right? I'm not saying this is the prime. I'm not saying that's not the primary motivating thing here. But remember at the beginning of the George Floyd protests, there were a lot of people, reasonable people, who were making the point that the COVID lockdowns were making a lot of the peaceful protests bigger and also a lot of the violent protests bigger because people had nothing else to do. They've been locked up, right? And there were all these sort of anecdotal things about, people saying to the cops, hey, look, I'm gonna be back here tomorrow because I got nothing else to do. Voting, these numbers about voting, couldn't some of it be, regardless of the political passion, people are working from home, they are constantly looking, or they're not working at all, they're constantly looking for a legitimate feel-good excuse to get out of the house, and waiting on a line to go vote is one of them. And couldn't it be that somehow the COVID thing, it's not that people are voting against COVID policies or for Trump or anti-Trump. I mean, again, all of those things are going on too, but some of it is just like the marginal voter who normally wouldn't be bothered to get off his butt and go vote, or her butt and go vote, or a butt and go vote, is now like, what else do I have to do? Let's get out of here. I got to go vote. What do you think about that?
The weather was really nice today, and that is why I left the house. I was looking for an excuse to be out of the house with the windows down, and I was like, voting, that's a reason I can leave the house. So it's actually really funny you say that, because that's exactly why I tried to go vote today.
I sensed that. I sensed it.
How's the weather out where you are, David?
Well, I'm in California and the weather is glorious, but I have to say, if you want glorious weather, Tennessee in the fall is really tough to beat. But Jonah, I actually think there's something to that. How many communal activities have we been able to have? I mean, even, in the South where things are relatively opened up, I mean, a Tennessee football game is a sparse community of people by comparison. This is a public communal act that's very important. absolutely think there's something to that. I also think that COVID, hearing about lines and hearing about troubles voting, has put a lot of people on edge about their vote being able to be counted.
Right.
But what's
all
really
the attention on early voting, just an incredible amount of attention on where
Yeah.
to early vote, how to early vote, how absentee voting works, how early voting works, constantly bombarded in a way. And I worked election day operations for 2 presidential cycles. I've never seen anything like this. So yes, 45 million people have already voted. A lot of those people were going to vote later and are just voting earlier than before as well.
I think there's something. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, it makes sense that people would be so consumed with politics right now. I mean, think about this year. We've had an impeachment. We've had a pandemic. We've had an economic recession. We've had urban unrest. It's, the pandemic alone is already moving into one of the most significant mass casualty events in all of American history. Politics is front of mind for people in a way that it has never been in my entire life, with the possible exception of right after 9/11 or right in the run up to the Iraq War. So it just totally makes sense that this would be creating this kind of voting tsunami.
Yeah, I guess I would just say I buy that. I think that's actually smart, Jonah. That makes a lot of sense. I do think that it's just one of several factors, and the polarization thing is really the big.
Sure.
I mean, think about people that you talk to, or that you know, or that you deal with online. I mean, nobody's really neutral. Nobody's really like undecided about how they feel about the last 4 years, right? I mean, people are either really for Donald Trump or really against Donald Trump for the most part. I mean, I think there are, some conservatives who like his policies, don't like the guy, but are probably voting for Trump. And, when you look at the polling on his disapproval, the strong disapprove numbers are just off the charts, something we've never seen before. And by the same token, the people who love Donald Trump, they love Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in. And so I think people are fired up to go and cast a vote in a way that you're just not if it's if it's Bob Dole versus Bill Clinton. I mean, I think people cared about the race. They were interested, but it wasn't like people were just dying to go out and cast that vote.
All right. With that, closing thoughts before Election Day. Biggest October surprise yet to come? Or are we going to cruise for the next 2 weeks? Quick answer. Start with Jonah.
There will be exactly 6.3 more October surprises before the election. And weirdly, the 0.3 one will not get nearly the attention it deserves.
Steve?
Yeah, I think we are far from done with the October surprises, sadly. I think we'll see there will be big moments coming.
And there will be a November surprise. You heard it. There will be a November surprise.
Nice.
David?
Buckle up. I mean, and the October surprises, we're all presuming they're going to come from the Trump camp. That's an assumption that, may not be warranted. There may be more stuff coming against Trump. So, I think it's going to be the next 11 days will feel like about 3 months.
I'm taking the under. I say the polls are gonna, tighten, mostly stay the same. And they're actually, as much as we've had big events in this election so far, not a lot has really changed the fundamentals of the race. Unlike in 2016, I know Joan is a big fan of this isn't 2016. This isn't like 2016. Donald Trump led Hillary Clinton at various points in 2016. That has not happened. The polls shifted. That has not happened, really. And certainly not in the direction that they weren't already headed. So yeah, I'm taking the under. It's going to be kind of a boring 2 weeks. There'll be big news cycles, but not big.
We're going to revisit this. We're going to revisit this on election night.
I think big news cycles and buckle up is not inconsistent with stability in the race. I mean, we've had crazy news cycles for all of 2020 with the gap between Biden and Trump just bumping along. So I think buckle up and craziness and stability at the same time are probably the likely bet.
And
Sarah,
because we're going to do this again on election night, we will share details in the coming days. But because we're going to do this again on election night, we can just roll this tape back and play this for you, Sarah.
When the aliens have landed and
no, but I agree with Sarah. I think it's going to stay relatively stable in terms of the poll numbers and all that. I don't think the October surprises are going to do anything except maybe bounce some rubble. But I think one last point about tonight's debate that was sort of lost. The most interesting thing that Trump did in the entire debate was go back to his original, most effective talking point from 2016, which he hasn't done until tonight, which is to say, you're a normal politician, you're a regular politician. It's very effective. It's very good. Intellectually, it's hot garbage coming from this incumbent president running for a second term, but that doesn't matter. Politically, emotionally, it's very good. It's very effective against Biden, but it just shows that the only way that someone convinced Trump to be this Trump tonight is they convinced him, hey, look, in that last debate you did in 2016, this is what worked for you. You need to do that again. And that's basically what he did, including inviting a surprise guest to the debate. So Trump is going to stay in it. Time is a flat circle for Trump, and that flat circle is called 2016, and that's not going to change despite all the October surprises.
Steve, why don't you tell us just a little bit about November 9th and 10th and what's in store?
Yeah, we have a very interesting post-election conference, 2-day post-election summit, Monday, November 9th, Tuesday, October 10th, basically from noon until 6. And then we're going to have one of these kind of sessions at night for dispatch members, sort of more casual and probably with a drink. We have some of the leading sort of elected officials, thinkers, journalists, strategists coming to visit with us about what just happened in the election, what we can expect to happen next. Regardless of who wins, I think there's going to be a huge debate that will be kicked off on sort of what does the center right look like in these days and weeks and months to follow the election, and look ahead to a second Trump term or the beginning of a Biden administration. What will that mean? So we'll be hearing from Republicans, we'll be hearing from Democrats, a lot of smart folks. Sarah's going to be hosting, so that's the main reason to come.
And bonus,
it'll be fun.
It'll be my birthday and our producer Caleb's birthday on November 9th, the day the Berlin Wall came down, anniversary. So we'll have little, I don't know, I'll light a cupcake for myself and blow it out sadly on Zoom.
Steve, is it true, the rumor that when on the panel for what the future of the center right is going to look like, you're going to like play it out in balloon animals?
Yeah.
I was hearing that, but
it was going to be
could be wrong.
claymation, but that was getting too difficult to do the stop action, with Zoom.
People are saying.
Yeah, people are saying. Steve, where do folks go to sign up for that?
You could go to our website. You would ask me this. I think it's whatsnextevent.com.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
What's
go
next
to the dispatch. Go to the dispatch website, go to whatsnextevent.com, and you can sign up there. Join us. It'll be fun.
Not /dingo.
Whatsnextevent.com. We will see you guys on election night next, but of course we'll have the pod as usual on Wednesdays, and advisory opinions, and the Remnant, and the newsletters, the sweep, the morning dispatch. Subscribe, sign up, go to the website. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Night.